You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
これまでの定説を全く覆してしまう古墳が見つかったの。
こっちはヒルコ。この地方に伝わる伝説の化け物だ。
危険なんだよ。
夜9時を過ぎると赤い服を着た女の子が廊下から追いかけてくるよ。
地下室にある骸骨は昔交通事故で死んだ人の骨なんだって。
テケテケのお化けってさ、一人で体育館に入った人
真夜中の10時、学校のプールのシャワー室から血が噴き出すんだって。
ベートーベンの絵が抜け出してエギーセのために弾くんだって。
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on. I invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are putting our conservative dad hats on, and we are going to save the daughters of America. So join that sleaze.
That's so true. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover as well. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for something like 6 years. There's like 140 bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series, which there's like almost 50 of, where we talk about new release genre films. So if you want any of that, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. We definitely recommend making the jump for any regular listeners. And speaking of which, I am going to give our shout outs here. We had quite a lot of people sign up this month. So we had, at $5 a month sign up, we had Aiden Staggs. We had Harry Skoletsky sign up for an entire year of the show at $5 a month. You get a little bit of a discounted rate if you do sign up at the annual tier. I'm sure most people know by now, because we also had Scott Benson also sign up for a year. So those guys are getting a whole year of the show. Thanks so much. We had Johannes Masid. We had Harsh Malarkey sign up for $5 a month. We had Spencer Owens. We had Mike. We had King Dude 610. We had Edgar, Noah Heller, Dan Watkins, Sean Tennant. We're still going. Bryce Olson, Puppy Man 8334, M Reddy, Dan Malinowski, Adam Prosk, Vera Medej, Emilio R.A., B.U. Samuels, Joe Morris, Chad Falatic, Colin Riggs, Gren Flynn. Well, you guys were good to us while we were away.
Thank you.
Jackson Hahn, Obrasky, Reuben Sandwich. Give me that Reuben. I like that name, you know. Abby Holman. Joel Estrander, Christine Schultz, who signed up for an entire year of the show as well, Liam Melendi, and friend of the pod, Michael Chow. Thanks so much to Michael. He was recently giving us a shout out on, I think he was listening to the Branson Reese Roger Rabbit episode, and he was tweeting about it, saying that he really liked our discussion. So thanks so much, Michael. Awesome. We're gonna have to have Michael back on again soon. So thanks to all of you folks for signing up over on the Patreon. We appreciate that support a lot. And that is that's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you guys are listening on either one of those platforms, and I see the stats, I can see you right now listening on both those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners that way, and we appreciate that support as well. And the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you can think of. And you guys have thought of a lot of things. You have bought notebooks, you have bought pillows, you have bought hoodies, you have bought pens, posters, everything with Trevor's art on it. That link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. Apologies for the crazy messiness. I'm even flubbing some of my usual intro lines. It feels like it's been so long since we've been And we've been doing this. Jamie
we've been
was
out
on
of the groove
tour
a
with
little
his
bit.
band for a month. I went to TIFF for 2 weeks, and we're just finally getting back into that groove. But
you might not have noticed, I guess, because we did all.
You might not have noticed because we were
backlogging.
releasing episodes. We are consummate professionals. We were releasing
right.
episodes every week, pretending that we were living normal lives. And as a result, 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us. Which to sort of bring in the new TIFF year, as is always the case. One of my favorite programs and sections of the festival is the Midnight Madness section, the section dedicated to genre movies and midnight movies. And in order to celebrate a new Midnight Madness slate, which I had a lot of fun with at TIFF this year, we went back to the 1993 Midnight Madness program 30 years ago for 2 absolutely wild, absurdist comedy, sort of like thriller horror films that both had some very gleefully gross kind of animated funhouse energy into their styles and their premises. We talked about Alex Winter and Tom Stern's Freaked, which took some of that wacky sort of like Bill and Ted stoner comedy vibe and kind of updated it for a butthole surfer punk rock MTV like body horror remake of Todd Browning's Freaks. Just an absolutely insane movie that somehow got a studio budget.
Yeah, some of the best practical effects ever. Like just the makeup on Alex Winter's face alone. Like they had to basically dub all his lines because the half of his face was covered in prosthetics. It's crazy.
Commitment.
It's so good. It's so incredible.
Commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we paired that with the extremely underseen and bizarre Australian crime gone wrong thriller called Frauds, which stars Phil Collins as like a
Yes, it
Pee Wee
does.
Herman-esque like evil man-child who is like sort of an insurance claims investigator who really loves Rube Goldberg style pranks that he plays on people who try to screw companies out of money, and a very bizarre movie that has lived in Tubi obscurity since it came out in the 90s, but has some genuine like 80s Tim Burton levels of like childish visual sort of like slapstick mania to it. So I'm glad we got to check that out. It's one of those few like discoveries we sometimes make on the show where we're like, how has nobody seen this?
And it's one of those things that has it's very wacky and silly, and that's the kind of comedy is. But really, as it gets further into the story, it gets a lot more depraved and darker. It still holds that tone, but just the things that are happening are wild. So, and Phil Collins gives a fully committed performance, so I would highly recommend it.
It's very true. So that was 2 weeks ago over on the main feed. And then last week over on the bonus feed, we did a double feature of one of the, in my opinion, best old Hollywood sort of like B-movie filmmakers ever. We talked about Joseph H. Lewis, who is more commonly known for his noir films that he did, things like Gun Crazy, which is, kind of predates Bonnie and Clyde and does a little bit of the sexuality and the gun and the sort of like young romantic teen couples on the road kind of vibe. But also The Big Combo is kind of like his really big one. But we decided we were going to take a look at some of the ones that are maybe a little bit lesser known than those in his catalog. We talked about from 1945, My Name is Julia Ross, which is part like Hitchcock identity thriller, part sort of gaslight thriller, and also full-blown like gothic horror film about a woman who basically becomes like a live-in secretary to a murderous wealthy family who are trying to convince her that she actually is like dead and a completely different woman and like the wife of who the son murdered, that kind of deal. It's a really crazy movie, actually.
Yeah,
Jesus.
It's great. He boosts everything so much with his style. I mean, like we were talking about just the general scripts that those would have, and they're kind of generic, you kind of know what's going to happen, but he would throw everything he knew about filmmaking into those and make them so interesting. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And he did the same thing with the movie we paired it with, which was more at the tail end of his career. We talked about his Blacklist B-Western called Terror in a Texas Town, which has one of the goofiest premises I've ever seen. Basically by Dalton Trumbo, who had recently been blacklisted and had to, like not even put his name on the movie. So it's a very sort of like left-leaning Western that takes very serious ideas about, like the the sort of encroaching sort of fascist violence and all of this, but it does it in the context of Sterling Hayden from Doctor Strangelove is an immigrant whaler from Sweden who pulls up to a gunfight with a harpoon to defend the locals from the greedy, violent capitalists. And it is one of those things where immediately you've drawn a picture in your brain of a giant man holding a harpoon at like a showdown gunfight, and the movie ends in exactly the image your brain is conjuring up and how he gets his way out of that situation. And,
starts and finishes that way.
It's so well directed by Lewis, like very sort of like noir-esque action and some thriller beats to it as well. And yeah, very well done.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's a guy with a harpoon versus a gunslinger. You know, you can't go wrong with that. I'd highly recommend it. You got to get Justice, baby.
Yeah, Justice. So if you haven't heard that episode over on the Patreon last week, go back and check it out. But moving on to this week, we have our annual returning spot for friend of the show, the incredible horror illustrator and writer who did the art for this very show, but also has tons of incredible work you can find on his website and on his Instagram, which some of you might know as a Slimy Swamp Ghost. And he even has a new spooky middle school scholastic horror book coming out very soon called Scare Waves that I'm excited to for people to check out. That guest is Trevor Henderson. Trevor, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
No problem. Thanks for coming back. We have a spot every year pretty close to October that we're like, this is the Trevor spot? Yeah, this is the Trevor spot.
I'll start thinking up the next double for next year.
Hell yeah. Get prepped.
Yeah. So Trevor, as it goes, you've been on the show enough times to know at this point, you know, we always have the guests kind of bring movies on that they want to show us, things that maybe are kind of personal to them. And when I originally approached you, I was like, well, Trevor, you've got a book coming out. We got to promote this book. We got to talk about this book. And I was like, do you want to talk about any sort of like things that maybe inspired it? And you were basically like, look, you know, I'd love to promote the book, but can I just like talk about other things? Like, can I talk about like whatever I want? I have other things I want to talk about. And I was like, damn, this guy does not have hustler mindset. He just loves movies that much. But honestly, you still brought on some kid-friendly horror. So I
was just thinking that like that was not intentional at all. And it just occurred to me now that you mentioned it. That, like, oh shit, I brought on two kind of kids versus monsters movies.
Yeah, well, you know what? You also did that last time with the Midnight Hour and the was it The Lady in White it was called?
Oh yeah.
So do you know what, Trevor? I think you just kind of like, and I agree with you. I kind of like the idea of like movies that are just like watchable and friendly enough for kids, but still genuinely scary if you were to watch it as a kid, which I think is, you know, probably what unites your pairing this week. But why don't you tell everybody what the two films we're talking about this week is and why you loosely paired them together?
Yeah, so the loose theme this time is kind of like school children getting into hijinks and fighting really scary, gross practical effects monsters. So I brought School Ghost Stories, aka Haunted School, from 1995, which is a Japanese horror film about a bunch of kids who destroy this little statue outside of their school, and it ends up with them getting stuck in like this weird parallel dimension version of their school and having to deal with, you know, the slit-mouthed woman and all these other weird yokai, and there's a janitor that turns into like the Thing, basically. It's crazy. It's great. And it's like just like a showcase. Every scene is a cool showcase for a weird set piece. Like, they're obviously having the time of their life, just like dumping more goopy monsters and more weird puppets and more like strange set pieces onto it. It's great. And I paired that with HIRUKO the Goblin, which is by the director of Tetsuo the Iron Man and many other incredible films, Shinya Tsukamoto. And it's both out of character for him and also at the same time completely 100% in character for him for various different reasons, which is a similar premise, which is, you know, a student at a school teams up with this monster hunter kind of guy and tries to stop weird little human head spider crab demons from opening the gates to hell.
Lots of the Thing inspired spider legs happening in both these movies.
Yeah, and I feel like Haunted School is slightly more kid friendly because it's like, you know, there's monsters, and the monsters are scary, and they're never treated as comedic. And the kids are always in danger, but you know they're generally faring pretty well. Whereas in HIRUKO the Goblin, like there's geysers of arterial blood and people decapitating themselves and all kinds of wild shit. It kind of feels like it is. It feels like a Ghibli film where there are decapitations to me, or like maybe even like a Tintin comic gone wrong in some way. They're both incredible and they go really well together.
Hell yeah. So we're going to be talking about some haunted school Japanese horror, lots of goopy gore and creatures attacking small little children. So if Children in Danger is your, which we have talked about a lot on the show, I'll be honest about it. I was reminded of talking about Who Can Kill a Child last year.
Oh my God, I love that movie. Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, I think that there's a really fine line to walk with certain things where, like, not Who Can Kill a Child, which is a brutal film, but, like, these two films specifically of, like, feeling almost like gateway horror and could be gateway horror for kids, but also, like, no, not that. Because it's so
like also
weird.
still freaky enough that it would actually still, like, probably traumatize a child at the same time.
It would, yeah.
Especially
exactly.
HIRUKO, I feel like.
Yeah, HIRUKO, you should keep away from your kids. Haunted School, I could see, you know, younger kids really vibing with, especially if there was a parent like that. But HIRUKO is like, no, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, I felt like
I don't think any Shinya Tsukamoto movie should be shown to any child under any circumstance.
No, even when he's trying to make it more kid friendly, I'm like, dude, you're not totally capable of the child's film for sure. I feel like HIRUKO would be something I show my like a 13, 14-year-old if I ever have kids and, you know, they're ready to kind of get into horror. Whereas the Haunted School, I would probably let my, you know, like 10-year-old watch. Granted, though, again, and we'll get to it, there are some genuinely pretty terrifying things in the Haunted School. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't stress enough just how much fun the special effects people are clearly having in Haunted School. Like, it's so good. It's so good.
Oh, yeah. Well, that being said, I think we're going to jump right into it here. Let's kick things off. Let's start things off with HIRUKO the Goblin. All right, we are talking HIRUKO the Goblin, also known as Yokai Hanta HIRUKO, the 1991 Japanese supernatural horror film co-written and directed by Shinya Tsukamoto, who is kind of a legend on this show because I think it was Perry Rowland brought Tetsuo the Iron Man on fairly early on in the show. And then he also, I think, later brought on Tetsuo 2 as well, and we did Body Hammer, and we also did, I think, Tokyo Fist at one point too. So this is probably our fourth and maybe even fifth time talking about Shinya Tsukamoto and his unique brand of very textured, sexual, kind of industrial body horror stuff like Tetsuo, which is, you know, this very sort of like has this very lo-fi, surreal, almost like technophobia, scratching, screaming sound design of and you know, body horror elements to it that reminded us of things like Eraserhead and Videodrome. But he also has like a very uniquely jolting and kind of untethered camera style where he loves to move, he loves to get unhinged with the editing style, he loves to, you know, completely meld elements together. Like Tetsuo, it's like steel and steam and sweat and flesh and rust and oil and blood until like you literally can't tell one scummy texture from another one, and you're just like totally going psychotic with him. And
he also seems to like the pacing, like very speedy pacing a lot of the time, especially when once things really rev up. It's just like not even like the way the camera moves. We have like when he represents the goblins, they're moving incredibly quickly in this kind of POV shots, and even characters, the way that they react are being very sporadic and screaming and kind of just very like throwing their bodies all over the place. It's very fast paced in that sense.
Yeah, he has a certain level of like surreal energy to him that he just likes to. Yeah, is a guy's dick suddenly a giant power drill? Why not? It is. Yeah, there you go. And you get all the screaming reaction shots.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and even when he tries to retain himself into something like that, someone maybe would do a little bit more normal, like something like when we talked about Tokyo Fist, which is like, you know, kind of a masculine romantic boxing drama a little bit, where it tries to deal with themes of like a character feeling inadequate or being angry about, you know, sort of relationships in a modern sort of dilapidated kind of Tokyo. But it's like, yeah, what if that was expressed in insane shots of like actually following a fist into a body as it just like completely explodes it, you know? And it's like trying to get like tangible expressions and kind of feelings out of bodily destruction, which is the kind of thing which is probably the most Cronenberg element of his work that he does. And it's so cool that Shinya Tsukamoto is even still around. I was glad that we were jumping right back into him because, Trevor, did you get a chance to see his new one at TIFF? He had a new movie at TIFF this year.
No, I heard about that, but I was pretty limited in what I was able to nab for TIFF and what I could afford. So I ended up just mostly doing Midnight Madness. And
that's fair. Midnight Madness is always fun. Even just watching a big movie with the midnight crowd.
Exactly.
But he's been in a really weird zone recently where he's been kind of with Killing that came out in 2018 and Fire on the Plains in 2014. He's been very obsessed with and tormented with this like post-war Japan kind of stuff. Like he's been making these grim sort of like anti-war period piece, essentially parables. But what's been interesting to see is how, you know, so many of these techniques that you find in these foundational works, like in this one, like he has like a disorienting handheld digital video style that he's doing, even with his modern, like what should be more normal war drama period piece. Like this new one called Shadow of Fire was all about a little boy just living in like the ash and ruins of like a post World War II Japan, and like living with a prostitute and hanging out with a soldier who shows him what a gun can do. And like, you know, so he's doing things like this, but even then it's still just like the idea of like violence as this really perverted, you know, very haunting, you know, experience that you will remember forever is something that has just lingered through his entire work, even when he's trying to do something commercial, which is kind of where I wanted to start with this, because we're going here back to the beginnings of his career. This is his sophomore feature, HIRUKO the Goblin, which, you know, he did his, you know, apocalyptic Japanese cyberpunk film Tetsuo the Iron Man, which was very surreal and very grotesque and very independent and underground in terms of its filmmaking style. And this got him the opportunity, due to some sort of scholarship that he won because of Tetsuo, where he got the opportunity to work for a studio, work with sets, and he got a manga to adapt by Deijiro Morohoshi. And so he had, you know, like elements to work with. He had a real film crew. He had, you know, and a slightly more commercial premise that you might see in I don't know if you want to go as far as saying like maybe like an American demon possession film or like an Italian horror film, but to me it's very funny that this is probably Shinya Tsukamoto's like most normal movie, and for anyone else this would be like the weirdest movie they ever made in their entire career.
Yeah, I watched this with I watched a lot of the movies with my brother Shane, and so he's gotten more used to these kind of things. But I watched it with my other younger brother Alec, and as soon as it ended, he enjoyed himself, but he was like, that was interesting. That was weird. Yeah. And like it's just fun to get that reaction, especially when we're seeing it as a more conventional film from this type of filmmaker. Even the tone is like really changed here from what I'm used to him. I'm not used to almost any comedy besides something that might be just so outrageous that it's kind of funny, but this one he's outright trying to be kind of comedic and wacky a little bit with
because rather than the usual like Lynch or Cronenberg comparisons, I feel like he gets for maybe the surreal expressionist body horror cyberpunk stuff where it has like a, I don't know, like a really thorough, like bleak kind of, you know, futurist kind of element to it. This does have more of like, you could compare it to something, a little bit of Fulci, a little bit of Raimi in terms of the slapstick sort of like animated sort of splatter elements in there. And,
even
I
the gore
felt
is used as a joke, right? Like when we start seeing all these decapitated people, which we'll get to, it is so over the top that you're like what? Like it's just a ridiculous amount of blood and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and even the surrealness of it, it's very similar to what you would see like Obayashi do in terms of surrealness, right? Like it's very like there's almost like this brightness and this glitteriness to it that then gets really, really dark and interrupted. It's like the haunting has an effect on the actual look and texture of the movie sometimes. And it is interesting to see him rein himself in and do something that is, a little bit more traditional body horror in terms of, there's less, I think, in my opinion, just in terms of character psychology and stuff, there's less like anxiety and rage and expressionism on display, and definitely less like sexual elements and sexual repression elements that he has in so much of his other stuff that he's doing. But this and this one almost reminded me of just kind of being a fun splatter movie. Like this seemed more interested in being animated and gruesome. Jamie, do you remember the name of that Japanese horror one we did a couple months ago of the guy who did it all by himself and he was in his room?
And he basically redoes like the Evil Dead.
He basically remade Evil Dead on $10,000 in his house.
Bloody
in
Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell.
Yes, that's the one. That's the tone this struck more for me than the usual Shinya Tsukamoto style film, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that movie is so good. But like these are both great, but man, Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell is such a good time.
One of the greatest titles of all time.
A man purely just passionate about the Evil Dead and is like, I'm remaking that as in any way possible, like in whatever way I can. I'm going to remake this movie. I highly recommend that to anyone that missed that episode.
Because I remember when we talked about that too a few months back, we were like, we kind of felt that wasn't even necessarily homaging Sam Raimi or Peter Jackson's like manic splatter comedy sensibility, but kind of straight up plagiarizing it at times. But it still had this very weird, cool, very lo-fi, distorted look to it that almost resembled like shot on video horror and some surreal sort of like Japanese ghost story elements. And then obviously you get the chunky, goopy kind of like gore effects and stop motion animated creatures and everything like that too.
What's interesting, and I guess maybe I should save it, but because I think it's for the next film, but there is something that I've noticed that's in the Bodybuilder movie where they have like giant ghosts or demons, and like there's one shot that ends in the Bodybuilder movie where it's like the big eye of one of the ghosts, and I think in Haunted School they have a very similar thing where it's like a big ghost that's looking into them through the doorway and everything. I don't know if that's something that comes from Japanese ghost stories in general, but it's just something I've seen a couple times now.
Well, Japanese ghosts are always like, you'll always have more inventive and weird and like strange ghosts than you'll get in North America, which is usually just like a guy. A lot of the time it's just a guy. Whereas like you'll have giants and like all kinds of weird.
And it's usually just a guy like yelling and going at you very quickly. There's a lot more.
Maybe his jaw will go really big for a minute or something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that there's a similar level of there's something interesting I think to be said that like such an underground even Japanese horror film like Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder from Hell, which is again all the makeup effects, all the acting, writing, directing, camera, it's all basically done by the guy who's in it. So obviously there's an incredibly sort of like crude kind of style to that we liked, and an ambition to that. And it's interesting to see sort of similar elements done by Tsukamoto, who obviously we know is also a bit of an underground filmmaker and can have that style, but being given the chance to actually do this with a little bit of money, have money for sets, have money for makeup, have money for, things that he didn't have in Tetsuo. And I think he used his limitations incredibly well in Tetsuo. But there is something to be said about the fact that this is more of a mainstream horror movie in terms of concept and in terms of production. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, it is very, like, you've heard a movie with this premise before. Like, it is a school was built on a gate to hell Lucio Fulci. And there are a bunch of demons or goblins or creatures that are hanging out behind that gate and waiting for their chance to escape. And when they do get their chance to escape, they are these little tiny bodiless heads with little spider legs. And they go around decapitating children in order to collect their heads and also turn them into goblins. They make children decapitate
themselves. They make children decapitate themselves. It's an important distinction.
That's true, because they sing these little siren songs and they grab onto your face like little face huggers, and they distract you with this beautiful dream while you are, maybe chopping your own head off with like a box cutter or something like that. And they're basically just collecting heads for the gates of hell. And all of a sudden we have an archaeology professor and a young student who is looking for is he looking for his teacher or his dad? I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
He's looking for someone as well. But I'm pretty sure that it's the relationship was slightly confusing because he's the guy who goes missing is his father, but the archaeology professor is his uncle-in-law. I was trying to actually write this down and actually web this out a little bit. But those two essentially have to go on a mission to find out, what exactly is going on with all of these incredibly gory deaths of children that are happening inside the school and how it is connected to the disappearance of his father. And Tsukamoto finds all kinds of really, really crazy, surreal body horror sequences in order to depict that. I imagine some of them has to come a little bit from the manga artist as well, who apparently is like a relatively well-known like horror manga artist. I was looking up a little bit about him, and he was talking all about his love of Salvador Dali and H.P. Lovecraft. So I was like, there's awesome. A little bit of that like ancient folklore horror imagery. And apparently this dude like really inspired Miyazaki as well, like very early on in his career, or at least Miyazaki says so. So
sweet.
This makes total sense.
There's a lot of the thing that I noticed first, like right away, was, and we've kind of already talked about it, but just here are some specifics, is the tonal change that I'm not used to from Tsukamoto, where you're introduced to the archaeologist and it already seems like, people aren't treating him very well. Like he's kind of a discredited archaeologist now. They almost seem to be mocking him and almost patronizing him a little bit. And they use that for...
Well, like what kind of guy could get excited about breakthroughs in mound theory? They're like, come on, man. Like, there's no fucking such thing as like supernatural beings hanging out in, dirt riddled tombs and shit. This guy's just an asshole,
this guy's off his rock. Yeah, exactly. And even the way that he plays him is very just kind of silly. A little bit like did you recognize him, by the way, Jamie?
Kenji Sawada is the actor playing him, who's actually the guy from the Kyoko's House section of Mishima. So we actually recently did talk about him.
Awesome. Yeah. I do. That's awesome. Yeah. Absolute king there. And so it does that kind of that tonal a change for me, just because this is like I've only seen Tsukamoto at his just absolutely most bizarre. It feels like Killing is a little bit more grounded, I guess, but everything else I've seen has been pretty surreal. And then when it introduces the kids, it kind of has like this. I don't know. It's kind of beautiful and like innocent and calming. It's got like the three come up onto the schoolyard and the camera's kind of like slowly panning down as they approach and everything. Mm-hmm. The music is fantastic, I thought. And I think both films actually have really great scores, just really sweeping and beautiful and just idyllic. And it's just not like, again, it's not what I'm used to from him. So him setting
it has a strangely kind of like
change happens.
It has a strangely like cheery vibe off the start, right? Where you're like hanging out with like this nerdy guy in his bucket hat who has like, you know, kind of like, he has some, you know, very silly, almost like childish energy to the way that he approaches his archaeology work that he does. And obviously also you have like all the kids like going to school. You have like a schoolgirl like riding her bike right next to like a sunny field of colorful flowers. And there's, you know, even the synths and orchestral strings and stuff are quite warm. And then obviously it is interrupted when Mr. Yabe is the teacher who ends up going into this subterranean tunnel with his student, who is the brother-in-law of the archaeologist Rihiro in this film. And they unleash this animalistic force that at first we don't see anything about. It's a completely invisible force that is depicted in these very, very Sam Raimi style, chaotic, handheld, shaky, just like point of view images, right? And the crazy one is just how physically animated that whole section is when the camera just starts charging at them. And like normally most filmmakers would stop it once the camera just like reaches the screaming face and they're like, there you go, you get the gist. That person was captured by whatever that invisible force was. But Shinya Tsukamoto's instinct is always to go a little bit more extreme if he can, and to include the shots of them being dragged through the tunnel almost like they've been hit by a car and the camera is attached to the car and we're watching them just get dragged through the tunnel. It's a pretty crazy image to start your movie on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It reminded me, especially just how quick it's going, and like you kind of have the blurs because of how fast the camera's moving. It reminded me of that section in Tetsuo the Iron Man where he's going through the city after he's taken his full transformation and just like speeding through the streets. It kind of reminded me of that a little bit. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, when he's got he's grown jets on his feet and he's just like motionlessly shooting through the city at 100 miles an hour. Yeah, it's great. It really does feel like a turbocharged version of the Raimi like evil force camera from Evil Dead, just like rocketing so fast. And there's a later sequence with it in the school itself that just like goes on way past where you think it would, and it's like super kinetic. It's amazing.
Yeah, and shortly after we pick up with some delinquent boys, including Yabe's son Masuo, who is the main kid who's going to team up with the archaeology guy. And I do like that they're just trying to like drink lake beer on the school property, that they're literally just like keeping a bunch of beer cold like in the dock, and the creepy janitor. Both movies also have a creepy janitor, worth noting. Yes. Janitors in Japanese haunted schools are very scary. This one in particular is like scratching his like sickle along like the school wall. You're like, what the fuck is this guy doing?
He's really trying to come off as threatening.
Yeah, and what it kind of kicks into gear pretty fast, because the girl who was in the tunnel with Yabe is named Reiko. And she kind of comes back as this, this very unreal kind of ghostly force that at first the boys are a little confused by, because they see her kind of like what looks to be, like seducing a boy with like a little ominous lullaby about her like secret dreams that they're kind of watching happen. And also Masao starts like burning up and like emitting steam from his back every time one of these boys kind of goes missing, which we later find out, I guess, is kind of like the souls or the faces of these decapitated children, like pushing their way through his body, like every time someone dies. And you literally start to see like, it almost looks like tattooed faces on his back.
Yeah, and there's something creepy about them. The ghosts have them, like when they bury into his or burn into his back, they're smiling too, which just adds like a little bit of a creepy factor to it. Just because it's obviously that's not the case whatsoever. Every time you see somebody die, it's either a decapitation, a huge scream before that decapitation, maybe just a huge blood splatter on a window. I think that's the one they start with. But I like right away
they show you a little bit more and more of the process every time, where we're like, okay, she clearly drew that boy in, and then blood sprayed all over that wall, and then a face appeared on this kid's back. And at first it's very surreal. It's connecting this to you completely just through visuals. And then at a certain point, we start to see, like some of the kids actually get drawn into the sort of hypnotic luring process, which because I had recently, because of Zone of Interest playing TIFF, I had just rewatched Under the Skin recently. I was like, yeah, there's a little bit of like, a monster luring in these boys and then, slaughtering them, except the process is a little bit different here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that they slowly, the drips and drabs of revealing the creature design and what's going on with the creature is so well done through the whole movie, all the way to the last 10 minutes.
When you find out the camera is attached to spider legs, it's very funny.
Yeah. First, it's just an invisible force.
Oh, there is something like kind of curious about it at first when it is so low to the ground, the way the POV is and how fast it's moving. You're just like, what is this goblin? Like, what does this look like? Because I mean, and now, when it's finally revealed, goblin for me seems like a little strange of a title to give it, but
it's not what I would choose. Yeah.
Right. But in general, I was just curious, like, what could this design possibly be? And then they also have you think about it later on too, when they start doing the decapitations and the goblin is like playing with the heads and shit, but you can't see the body yet. And so you'll see a head kind of like move up and down a floor as it's being grabbed, but you still can't see the creature. Until it's revealed, I was constantly trying to come up with like, what is this thing going to look like?
And the reveal shot is so cool too, because you see the first victim, like a woman's head, like singing really beautifully at night in these beautifully lit shots. And then you're like, what the hell, what's going on here? And then eventually the reveal shot of what the goblins are is her face like upright in water. And then you just see like the 6 spider legs like daintily pop up around it through the water. It's like really, really well done.
Absolutely.
And then eventually you'll get their reveals that they can fly. They have little wings that pop out and stuff. It's great.
I was curious if you guys had this reaction or not. One of my favorite things that recurs through the movie is that they, like each boy kind of runs into this little girl's head and she's singing a beautiful song and she's a little pale looking, but she's, clearly they like her. They have a crush on her or something. They're going towards her. And, at a certain point, I was like, all of you know that she has like spider legs now. And I'm like, if you just like change the angle of where you're looking at her from, you would see these spider legs. Like there's that great sequence when she's like sitting behind the piano and she's playing this very beautiful melody for him. And I was like, dude, if you like stepped like a few inches to the right, you would see the spider legs, man. Like it's not like she's not that convincing anymore after the reveal is actually made in terms of like how she's disguising herself as I'm actually just like a beautiful girl singing a song for you. And I'm like, no, you guys all know she's a spider now. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Let's, you've seen the wild animated, like hysterical screaming running sequences. You've seen your friends at this point chop their own heads off with box cutters and broken glass and spray blood geysers like straight out of fucking like Lady Snowblood. At a certain point, this pale, disembodied head needs to not have power over you just because she sings a song.
Do not be trusted. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, at that point, you're you're fooling. You're convincing yourself. You wanna believe at that point.
You want to make out with a ghost girl.
There's some good gags with her head too, where at one point they think that she's like hiding in some like pots and pans, so they're like playing whack-a-mole with the pots and pans looking for a head and stuff like that. There's some like goofiness to this, as well as like the frenzied and grotesqueness that you would expect of Tsukamoto.
Yeah, and there does come there's a lot of chaos that comes from not just the kills, but the fact that the star what's the young kid's name, the one that gets burned every single time,
Masao.
Every time like someone dies, Masao just gets burned, so there's always this added tension to every single scene. And I would there's like 4 or 5, maybe 6 deaths or something like in this. So every single time they just cut back to the kid and he's just in such pain and screaming, and his friends are trying to console him. And there's so many moments where they go back to the scene with the kids from whatever they were showing you previously, and they're bandaging up his burn again to the point where at a certain point he's got like 3 bandage faces and 2 that are still open and you can see them. And I just like the constant addition of those already chaotic scenes, having that also be a part of it.
Yeah, he loves Tsukamoto has always loved the physical toll and like the almost irreversible nature that like you could do like someone's soul's trying to like come through the back of someone or whatever, but he's like, no, what would that look like in terms of like would it be charred, would it be scabby? Like that's the kind of stuff that Tsukamoto kind of focuses on. And
it's such insult to injury, like you're already losing your friends, they're being decapitated in front of you, and then their happy faces are burned onto your back every single time. It's just
you already have to come across their heads just like sitting in trees, which is like one of the freakiest images for me, when he just it's like the tree branches almost look like spider legs, but they're not. It's just his head hanging there.
And then and again he adds this little like it's almost just to be depraved, a little bit perverse, where it shows the head like falling off the tree and just into the darkness kind of thing.
Like leaking and shit.
There's just all these little details that he goes on that I don't think would be in a more conventional, haunted school kind of film like this.
Yeah, he always goes the extra step to be like textural or nasty or both, preferably in every possible way. The stuff with the back I'd actually forgotten about, and it's so gross and weird and just like totally not even necessary for the narrative at all. I mean, I'm sure it's from the manga carried over, but I refuse to believe it's as gross as Tsukamoto makes it in the manga. Like, he really does go the extra mile. It's great.
I love early on, this is just a small little detail I like from the kids, but I like early on too that, they're shown drinking the beer from the lake. And then later, one of the times when they cut back to them bandaging up Masao from one of his burns, they're still drinking the beer like they brought it from the lake. There was just something small about that detail that I was like, these kids are still partying, they're trying to keep their head on straight.
Well, yeah, I mean, both of these share in common that like these kids are done, man. Like the next one ends, it's like the last day before summer vacation. It's like, now we're going kid mode. We don't need any of this shit.
That's right.
The haunted demons just said, no, it's time to grow up, and they kind of get a little bit more. We start to actually find out what it is that's happening through a little bit of the exposition through Mr. Yabe's notebook. Where we find out that I was a little confused because I thought this was going to be like Hiruko was like a goblin, like that was just the name of a goblin, but it sounds like they're all kind of named Hiruko, or like
it's almost like it's like Legion, we are one, but
it turns out that it's like this like 8th century like monster force of some kind, and the seal that was broken at the beginning is what kept him in like this stone room underground, and they have to figure out how to like seal him back in the mound and kind of all of this stuff. And eventually, obviously, this is going to lead to an entire subterranean set piece where he's going to go down there. And I will say that some of the imagery that like leads us are there was one shot in this that actually I thought was astonishing, which is the reverse side of the head singing in the foggy river, because I think you were talking about that reveal, Trevor, which is a great moment when it's just the pale little girl's head face up in the pool of water singing the song, and then revealing the spider leg straight out of the thing where it starts crawling around and moving around. And they get into this whole set piece where they're actually fighting with her and everything like that. And there's a whole lot of great like physicality to that, which we'll come back to that set piece. But the shot that they do eventually when they do go underground and they do the reverse shot of what it's looking like when she's looking up at the moonlight in the pool, face up, singing her song. And it's all the little Hirukos at the bottom, like reaching up for her, being like, hello. She's got like a little collection down beneath. It's almost like those little ashy guys in like The Little Mermaid or whatever, who just like, they all like, just they're little like urchins that are just like stuck on the rock, forced to look at like, the girl singing her song up top. But it's so cool to get the reverse shot where you actually like you're in the cave and you see the reverse side of the water and the moonlight and her head and everything like that. And it's just a cool bit of like world building, which is maybe another image from the manga as well.
Yeah. Is that the moment where you see like the whole crowd of them? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, no, go ahead.
And their heads move as one. Yeah, it's cool. Sorry.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love the archaeologist's the tool that he uses. It's like a shock tool of some kind as he's fighting them off.
And also like a sensor, right? He used pots to create some sort of like demon sensor or something.
Yeah, he just cobbles it together. It's so cool. I completely forgot about that too.
Sawada's performance is so fun too, because he's just constantly like really reacting to all the chaos that's happening around him. So he's, as all of this violence is happening, he's the one that's also screaming at the top of his lungs, but kind of just frantically using his tool. It almost seems like he's not skilled with it, but he's just determined enough to try to use it against them. It's very funny the way he comes off. It's like he knows what he's talking about. He's aware of these goblins and this kind of ancient past and everything, but he still comes off as kind of a goof a little bit. I love that mix in his character.
He's so very, very watchable and very goofy, but also competent in a very it's a good mix.
Yeah, like it feels sometimes like he stumbles into the right answer, but his knowledge at least gets him to that point. You know what I mean?
I do love that his main weapon in this is bug spray. That's just a good joke. That's
great. Yeah. When he stops using whatever contraption he has, and it's just spiders coming at him, and he's just like, spray, spray, spray.
Well, because he kind of figures it out during that set piece where, Reiku is seducing Masao, and the whole deal is that, she's playing the little piano, and I think it's right after too that the janitor like chased them around and was like, I told you guys to leave, like you guys caused all this to happen, but she's singing her siren song, and for some reason, even though he knows that she's a spider, she's seen the spider legs, he's getting a little bit closer to her, and we do get revealed that they kind of weaponize like feelings and dreams and kind of hopes and all of these things, and she eventually at some point is like drooling on his head from the ceiling, and we go into this dream where he is being sort of reintroduced to her because he has like a romantic feelings for her, and it's almost like this like field picnic style thing where everything's bright and shiny and happy, and but she is telling him in this perfect dream of like a date together to cut his own throat with a chainsaw.
It's an amazing scene. It's so cool.
And he puts it slowly to himself, just smiling and everything.
Yeah, and then he wakes up to see that the spider head is like basically nearly making out with him, and is, straight up doing like the alien face hugger, kind of like grabbing onto his skull and stuff. And it's at that point that the archaeologist has to come in with the bug spray and actually start like fighting it. And there is some cool little beats to, having the head like roll up its legs so it can like roll on the ground and like hiding in certain things. And it almost does like a kaiju movie level of like evolving and growing. Like I was thinking about of what's the oil monster Godzilla? Hedorah? That's his name, right?
Hedorah, so, yeah.
You know how he's the giant sludge, and then all of a sudden he grows wings, and Godzilla has to figure out how to deal with that. That's what I was thinking about when all of a sudden this spider head woman just had like butterfly wings and was like, trying to shove her tongue down throats and shit like that and flying around.
I love when monsters have like stages that are slowly kind of revealed, so the characters have to like react on the ground, like just quickly decide what to do now, and then it keeps going. Like it's like boss stages. It's great.
Yeah, exactly, and come up with like a new solution. I also, and then just because of a new design, usually the director has to figure out a way to kind of capture that as well. And something I was surprised by, especially just given the first half of the movie where they take a lot of time to slowly show you the design of the creature. The last 45 minutes, they just show it to you like over and over and over again. And he's not shy about the practical effect work whatsoever. Like he's very confident in showing the spider demon things crawling around, and in every which way too. Sometimes they're on the ceiling, like you said, they eventually evolve into a flying form. They have a ton of close-ups when they're actually walking towards characters, and it looks fantastic. It looks awesome every single time. So that was something I was really impressed by and not really expecting, to be honest.
Yeah, the effects are amazing. They're all practical, obviously. They're all done very ingeniously. And I'm not entirely certain. I have to look up the credits because I have a bad head for it. But I believe the guy who designed all that and did the special effects also did a lot of the character creation and monster design for the Splatterhouse game series and House one of the House of the Deads as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Takashi Oda is his name. Special creature effects.
Very cool.
I follow him on Twitter, and he posts pictures of the goblin crab leg mechanism every once in a while, like all kind of rotted, but still cool.
Oh, that's sweet. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great work. It's awesome. I love the design. And like, we have seen the design in itself. It is very much like the thing. Just I was really surprised by the confidence in him showing it so much and so well.
Yeah,
because sometimes that can backfire, right? Like if the effects work doesn't hold up, or you don't have the visual imagination to like actually make it physically feel threatening or scary in the way that they should be, that can go really wrong to show it so much. But
this could easily be
they do it pretty well here.
Silly, I feel like, and not like creepy in any way. And of course, there's some silliness built into it, but anything that is kind of funny seems on purpose. Whereas I'm never really laughing at the creatures themselves. They are kind of terrifying.
Yeah. I looked it up. It is Takashi Oda, and he worked on, among other things, HIRUKO the Goblin, Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer, some of the Gamera films, Splatterhouse, House of the Dead. Extremely cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. The effects work in Body Hammer is amazing as well. We talked about the some of the ways that they meld like that sex scene with the mom where he's like holding a gun to her head or whatever, and then the gun becomes like part of his hand and shit. Like it fucking what a crazy.
I kind of see that. I've only seen.
Did he do the more the more modern Gamaras? Because I think I've seen a couple of those.
I believe he worked on some of the 90s trilogy of Gamera films, which are for me
they look great.
They're incredible. Those three films, along with Shin Godzilla and the original Godzilla, are like the kaiju films for me. They're so good.
Yeah, I think they're great. Another thing I like too is they kind of set this up for. They have these almost visions of hell where they see all the crab spider creatures and the other souls that have been buried or burned into the kid's back, but he's almost seeing him as a vision of like. He's almost like the devil or something. He's got all the burned people in the back. He's got the 3 horns coming out of his head. He's like reciting some spell of some kind or something like that. And then later on, it becomes kind of the answer to everything. He is the one that he puts on this almost makeshift crown and does a similar ritual or whatever to kind of save the day. But I like all the imagery of hell that they set up prior, just in the vision, is very cool as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty ingenious all throughout.
Yeah, it's seamless the way they go through all of these kind of surreal moments where they have the more idyllic, like the field. It almost doesn't make any sense. It's just a vision of pure bliss that you're like, where is this field? Why am I here? It just doesn't make any sense. But then also going into these visions of hell at the same time. But then also keeping a wackiness to some of the character reactions and everything. It's honestly, he's balancing a lot and he's doing a really good job of it. Not that I'm surprised, because that is kind of his thing,
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the archaeologist basically goes like Indiana Jones mode at a certain point. He's like, let's analyze the symbols. Let's find the land shaped like a rhombus. Let's draw lines to statues to the gate and all of this. Like it feels like such a strange like solution to the presented problem, which obviously in like something like a Fulci movie, you would just be like, nah, give the fuck up. Like you're just going to descend and it's going to be fucking horrible. Like this kind of character doesn't typically make sense in a story like this, because it's like this character would just be defeated or he would be decapitated, or like it doesn't make sense that this would be the way that I mean, shit, even the janitor, he thinks that he's going to get like changed or infected by the goblin at one point. So he just shoots himself in the head off screen.
Right.
Yeah,
they do that really. I forgot almost about this detail too. Right before he walks away and you hear the gunshot, they have that little, like, it seems like a little tentacle thing coming out of his neck as if he is starting the transformation. Which I found interesting. I do wish they showed, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm just misremembering and haven't looked at my notes deep enough yet, but they don't actually show that full transformation, which if they could have pulled it off, I would have liked to see, just because that heavily implies that
you mean like
something.
the actual head being torn off and then turning into the monster?
Yeah. Oh, they do.
It's at the very end. Yeah, at the very end, you see the head. I just forgot
about it in my notes here.
Yeah, it's kind of in the end where everything else is going on. But yeah, they definitely do show like the head just like decapitating itself with pushing itself off. It's really cool.
Well, and I was going to say, because they show them find Mr. Yabe when they eventually go into the stone room and everything like that too, right? And they show where they, and I think he maybe is the one who gets his head taken off.
I believe it is. Yeah.
And he actually transforms. But the thing that I'll say distracted me in that scene in a great way was I was laughing way too hard at the gag of all of the goblins just like existing down there and just like screaming in the background of like every shot.
Yeah.
It was like that was so funny that I actually had to go back and like I feel like I stopped paying attention to the scene because I was like they're probably talking about something important and I just can't stop laughing that like they're in this open room with you know they're at the point where they're using spells and they're talking about stories of like the men like locking their wives in caves, and there's this whole subplot to it about the archaeologist having like a dead wife, which mostly just results in a gag where he's like carrying his dead wife's photo on his back through the whole set piece. When they find this like moonlight ray in the sky coming from the pool and all of that. But yeah, the whole thing where they're just screeching down below at the bottom of the scene where they're sitting there up top, like being like, yeah, how do we defeat these guys? How do we lock this gate? And all you can hear is, just like down below.
He does this really cool kind of low angle shot too, where he pans across them all, and you can just see all their like. It's what their
little hands like
look, they almost look like hands. Yeah, it's the strangest design for a mouth that's yelling or something like that. It is very weird. But you're right, Trevor. It was the dad. I think when he gets down, they find the dad's head, and he's the one that stretches out like the thing style and turns into it. So yeah, that is a wild thing to watch because again, it was just something I wasn't expecting from this kind of a film.
Yeah, it's deceptive. Like the tone is so like we said, kind of gateway, and then you'll drop like people committing suicide and cutting their own heads off, and all. And
then again, you have the archaeologist just surrounded by these like newly found spiders that aren't even fully formed yet, and he's spraying them like crazy in the finale. Yeah. It's very funny in that sense. It's such a weird amalgamation of things where that is very comedic. Just a guy yelling and spraying a bunch of giant bugs with bug spray as the answer to this hell that has been put upon them. But then you still have like genuine decapitations and genuine head stretching where you see every muscle fiber like being broken before he's turned into a spider monster. It's
and they're being in the finale too. They're being chased around in like full stop motion animation by like these heads with spider legs, and it does turn into like a little bit of like an entire action set piece, which they eventually resolve by like finding some sort of like family heirloom. It's like this ancient crown helmet, and then saying the stories or the spells that they need to say to kind of close the gate and all of that. No, although of course Haiku makes like one last attempt, the lady spider to face hug the archaeologist, making him think that he can die in place of his wife or something like that, trying to exploit his feelings a little bit. And the kid ends up being the one that actually ends up sealing the gate. And all of the one shot of all of the insect faces like trying to make their way through the little door, and it's basically just like a shot of like what if someone like slammed a door on their faces. It's kind of funny.
And they are mad about it too. Like the ones that actually have heads too or left it's very funny to watch. I think they end on the Ryko head kind of being like screaming that it's closing in on them and everything. Yeah, it's a really interesting finale, and then it kind of turns into which I do like, and I think it was deserved just in the sense of the tone. It has that very nice kind of farewell to one of the ghosts. I think it's Raiku.
Yeah, the big,
where they have
big
this
head in the sky. Right?
Yeah, the giant floating head that seems almost
straight out of Donnie Darko.
Yes.
The like cosmic trail
totally.
thing. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that. Yep, totally. And then I guess it's kind of it turns into this, like they go into space, and then the rest of the people that have died throughout the movie join that head going into space. It's very bizarre, oddly kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's supposed to be like a children's coming to term with mortality thing, and like souls traveling and that kind of, it's kind of what it feels like it's going for. It's just funny because it was so gruesome on its way to that idea that I was like, I don't know if that kid actually learned that lesson watting all of his friends cut their own heads off for
totally
spider demons. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I'm glad that he saw his crush's soul go off to the next realm or whatever it is, and it seems like it's a found peace.
And the archaeologist walks into the sunset being like, I don't need my wife, I'm all good. I got my fucking weird little sensor, and I'm on. They realistically, this is the one they should have made sequels to. I would have been like an Indiana Jones series, but it's a guy who runs into strange Japanese demons.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
I'd watch every single one of those. Yeah, absolutely.
I do like that he mentions that he should have used nicer music to lure the goblins, which implies that like it's the music that sets them off.
Well, yeah, he might have found like better good goblins,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because he likes them. He likes supernatural things. He didn't want to kill anyone. He didn't want to bug spray anyone.
Exactly.
Which is such a wacky tone in terms of a character, because it's just, once again, it's really not Tsukamoto's sensibility, that kind of character. Like his characters are all like, fuck the world, like I think about our love will tear this fucking world apart as we're gonna like fucking demolish Tokyo and become the new flesh metal people in the Tetsuo movies, right? Like his philosophy, and even in his war stuff, like it just seems so much bleaker in terms of the characters he's attracted to, the psychologies and psychosis that he's attracted to.
Do you think it's because he was doing like it was his first studio gig, so he wanted to give him more?
That's what I think. I think he was just he was doing what a studio filmmaker does: is they take material the studio wants to make and they punch it in the way that they know how to do that kind of thing, And as a result, he does get something that has a little bit of a similar vibe to like Obayashi's house, just in terms of like the surreal, haunted, weirdness. You have some of the flying heads. You have the bright, colorful, silly attitudes, a little bit mixed in with the more grim stuff that kind of comes up on the side, although in this case a lot more sort of creature and splatter movie eccentricity and sort of slapstick energy and everything. And it is very cool, I will say, to see Tsukamoto work with studio sets and studio cameras and work with someone else's material. But part of it for me, if we maybe are pivoting towards the reductive rating round, is this still ended up in the very, very high 3 territory for me. I want to come back to it because I was just a little surprised by exactly that, where I was like, it had the silly, gory manga energy to it. It had some of the tonal wackiness that I, thought I'd get a little bit out of it. And in terms of story and character, I did feel a little bit like it was a little like 4 higher for him, where it was not as perverse in terms of philosophy and psychology. And there is one of those things where it's like, I really like the perverse expressionism of him as a filmmaker. Like in Tetsuo, there's something mutilating about the futurism of it. There's something bleak about that. And even Tokyo Fist, where it's like the emotional romantic stuff is released through the destruction of the body and that kind of stuff. Like that to me is a little bit missing in this, because he was adapting someone else's material and because the studio clearly wanted him to release a kind of a fun splatter horror film that was kind of popular at the time, especially with the post Evil Deads. So like I totally get that. And I also think that he did like a good job of someone being asked to do that kind of movie. It's just one of those things where when this devolves a little bit into them sitting down and talking about like the conventional stuff about like the dead wives and, you know, fathers being possessed and all of this, it didn't quite hit me as hard, and it was kind of just more silly and entertaining. But like as far as studio horror goes, like the fact that I'm saying that this is like a conventional studio horror film, because it's not. Like it's fucking crazy still. It's weird, it's gross. It features ghostly disembodied goblin heads with spider legs seducing children with siren songs so that they will chop their own heads off. So like at a certain point I'm like, is my argument full of shit? I don't know, but that was just my immediate impression watching it for the first time. But I will say, like, this is one I see myself coming back to and maybe warming up to that specifically. It was just, in terms of being super familiar with Tsukamoto, this was a little bit impersonal for him in a way that I was not expecting on first watch, but very solid still.
Yeah, no, I do totally get that. I think I'm going to give it a 4. I really do still kind of love this movie. I totally agree with what you just said. In regards to what I prefer Tsukamoto to be doing, I just think that this is it's unique in that sense that you get to watch somebody so weird, so unique, and so like perverse, do something that's more of a conventional studio horror movie. I always like. Yeah,
it's kind of why that's kind of why we love The Fly, right? Because it's like Cronenberg's weirdness being mixed with like a more commercial premise for a horror movie.
Yeah, for me it always just pushes it into this weird state where he finds balance, but there's always this kind of whiplash that I really enjoy, where you have a more conventional moment, more of a conventional dramatic beat, and then all of a sudden you have just geysers of blood spilling out of a body, and you know, that head being taken into a spider monster, and then, you know, it's seducing children through song, like you said. It just there's so many weird elements that mix in with the more conventional elements, that I think it wins me over by the end. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. But yeah, that being said, the visual effects are incredible. Like every single time they show the spider monsters, I found it to be kind of fresh, and I love the way that he captures the evolution of them. And how he slowly unveils them, but then still takes a lot of time showing you them. Like the first 45 minutes is very suspense built in that sense, but then he just outright, every scene basically has one of the spider monsters. And I love that he's not shy. Anytime a director isn't shy about the practical effects and has that confidence with it, it really wins me over. So yeah, I would recommend it. It is very traditional, just in the sense of how the character beats are going to go and all of that, but if you're in it just to watch the incredible effects and just watch, you know, Tsukamoto obviously have a very good time with what he was allowed to do, you'll have a
and working time with a cinematographer well known for those like 90s era Godzilla movies. So like it has some of that texture to it and color to it as well. It looks nice.
Yeah. And it once again, it is wild to have something that's like you have a lot of innocence, and even a lot of the score has this, what reminded me of those scenes in like older RPGs where it would just be the small town and like you're talking to your friends. It's just very inviting and very beautiful. But then you have the most perverse, crazy spider monster shit at the same time. So yeah, that back and forth is great. So 4 out of 5 for me.
Hell yeah, for you, Charlie.
Oh yeah, 4 out of 5 is where I would land as well. And I totally agree with all those points. I came at the movie from having, I think I've only seen Tetsuo the Iron Man. So I'm severely lacking. Oh, and I just watched Haze recently. But when I first saw it, I was coming from a place where I was really not familiar with Tsukamoto's work at all. So I kind of just took it on its own terms where, but like if I came to that expecting like, oh, it's a Tsukamoto film, like it's tame. It's quite tame for that. Cause he does all kinds of wild, transgressive, extremely bizarre shit.
Yeah, so watch it before you watch like Body Hammer or Snake of June or Bullet Ballet. Because I was like, I think this is like my 11th or 12th Tsukamoto movie. I genuinely love him. Like
that's going to color it. Yeah, that'll color your viewing experience for sure. But if you go into it expecting like a standard kind of like sort of kid adjacent like J creature feature, there's all kinds of wacky wild shit happening here. But both I can definitely see that point of view as well. For me, it just works so well, and I love the characters so much, and it feels like a Hirsch, like a Tintin comic, but with brutal decapitations to me. So I have no choice but to love it, and all the practical effects monsters and everything.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for HIRUKO the Goblin. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about more children being tortured by practical creatures in a movie called Haunted School. Stick around.
なんか一人多い気がして。みんないるのか？変なのどんどん増えてるんだ。なんでいつも変なの連れてくんの？
All right, we are back, and we are talking about Haunted School, aka School Ghost Stories, which is a pretty literal title. It is a 1995 Japanese supernatural horror film directed by one Hideyuki Hirayama and written by Satoko Okudera. Now, I have to ask you, Trevor, because there's not a whole lot of information about either of these two really out there. What's your familiarity level with these filmmakers? Or was this just one that you heard it on Reputation? Because this is one that's actually not that seen. It's not that widely available. So maybe tell us your first time watching this.
I saw HIRUKO the Goblin, and I saw it being discussed in the same circles as HIRUKO because it travels a lot of the same ground, and it, it feels similar. I'm not familiar with the director at all, unfortunately.
Now tell me, is this like the horror forums? Like, what are we talking about? Where were you seeing this discussed?
Just like on film Twitter through like different people. It might have been, there's a guy I follow on Twitter who is Christian V, I think his name is. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, I think he was talking about it someday, or maybe David Sodergren, who's an amazing horror author who highlights a lot of really deep cut films. One of those two, anyway. And it's not available. I've been petitioning like Arrow Video or Shout Factory or somebody to get the rights to these films, because not only is there's 4 of them, it's a whole quadrilogy of spooky ghost stories. And,
these must have been popular in Japan, I'm guessing, if they had enough market where they were like, let's keep making more of them.
He directed all 4, right?
I think he did the first 2, and then other directors did 3 and 4. I'm not entirely sure. But apparently, like, I've only seen the first one because that's the only one.
He did number 4 as well. Wow, no, he did. So he might have just skipped the 3rd one.
Okay.
Wow.
But yeah, the only one with reliable subtitles that you can find, because it's not conventionally available anywhere, is the first one. So it's the only one I've seen. But for all intents and purposes, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th one are as equally packed with ghouls and ghosts and cool spooky set pieces, and I would love to see them.
And I would assume if it was done by the same director, it'd have a similar competency. It's well made. So
it is, and I've heard that 2, 3, and 4 are as good or better. Like, there's not really a dip.
Cool.
And I just
the 3rd one is done by one of the Gamera filmmakers.
Oh my god, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
The Shizuku Kaneko.
Okay. So every day I hope for, it's one of my big like top 4 movies that I want to see get a big, stupid, boutique, fancy Blu-ray
Shout
release.
Factory, Haunted School, 1 through 4 release makes a lot of sense to me. Get on it.
Yeah, or Arrow Video or Severin or any of those guys. It feels like an Arrow Video or a Shout Factory type thing to me. But yeah, you can't. I don't know if there's any legal means of seeing this movie right now, and that's honestly a huge crying shame, because it's very, very, very fun and it's great. Such a good time.
Yeah, I had to watch it on
and I
BitChute.
wonder if part of it is just the fact that it's clear the director doesn't have like a kind of, an auteurist following of anyone being like, hey, we should restore this guy's work, like the same way with Tsukamoto. He has so much stuff like Hiruko the Goblin is now available on Blu-ray because so many people have ingested so much of his work at that point. Arrow has put out a really nice 8 film collection for him and stuff, and I'm just wondering if this guy got lost, because even his second biggest movie is a 90s drama called Begging for Love out of Japan that I don't know a single person who's seen this, which is rare. I follow a lot of people who dumpster dive and trash dive or even just look for underseen films in general, and I don't have a single mutual who has seen this or even marked it as like on their watch list or anything. So it's it is strange that we're talking about a filmmaker who his work quite literally doesn't appear to exist outside of Japan except for Haunted School, which is exclusively in the realm of sort of pirate sharing.
Right.
But clearly these movies were big enough to get 4 of them made, and there is something here to them. And I do wonder if part of it is because I couldn't find much information about this guy. This is normally the part of the section of the podcast where I would be like, here's the biography of this guy. I was like, I have no fucking idea. I could not find translated stuff with regard to this guy. And Satoku,
he seems respected. That's all I could really find. He won the Directors Guild of Japan New Directors Award. It seems like he's won a few other awards as well. So it's he's very respected, but there's nothing on the guy.
Yeah, and then his writer Satoku Okudera, who is someone who's a little bit more familiar with, just because she is well known for her writing collaborations with Mamoru Hosoda and the anime films that he does. So she wrote The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. And also wrote Wolf Children, which people might be a little bit more familiar with. Yeah, and then other than that, the only other people who worked on this that I was even slightly familiar with, the editor worked on Evil Dead Trap, which is an incredible Japanese horror film that we talked about this year. Awesome. Definitely a movie that if you liked what we talked about today, that is the grimmest, most disturbing version of that kind of movie that we've talked about. And also the production designer for this, which I want to give a special shout out to, because I think that if there's anything I really loved about this movie, actually, it was the production design. It was Hideo Nakata's production designer on Dark Water.
This makes sense. Yeah, it's the same vibe. Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah. But I'm assuming most people won't have seen this, so we will give the quick log line here, which is that it is essentially about a bunch of kids who have to spend one long evening in the abandoned wing of their elementary school. I do like too that this is not even high school kids or middle school.
Yeah.
It's literally elementary
grade,
school
kids. I think is
kids.
the oldest that they are. So yeah.
Yeah, that I really enjoyed about this. And there's rumors that this wing has been haunted, but no one's really sure about it. And at a certain point, one of the second grade girls goes missing in it, and the classmates kind of go looking for her, and they end up trapped inside, where they go through a series of what I'm going to call Japanese poltergeist / Goosebumps set pieces, where they just run into
it's
various creatures and ghosts and ghouls.
You just keep throwing them on top. You'll run into one cool, beautifully realized practical effect puppet, and the next scene you'll have anatomy dummies coming to life and all their guts are falling out, and then the next scene the slit-mouthed woman shows up. It's unrelenting. It's
that
wonderful.
was one thing I really did like once it starts getting into all the horror stuff is it has no rules, really. It's just you're in a haunted location, and these spirits, demons, whatever,
ghosts and ghoulies ensue. It feels like what they wrote in the script a little bit.
Whatever they want. These spirits are just we've got creative ideas, and we're going to scare these kids in different ways. There's even at a certain point, there's a floating red beast guy that just pops up, and he's almost just playing
Slimer.
pranks the whole time. Yeah, so it's very funny to go from that to the big, the giant mouthed woman, and then to hands, and it's all over the place, but in a very fun way.
There's all kinds of stuff. Yeah. It definitely feels like a haunted house ride. It feels
totally.
I think the subgenre is lovingly referred to as Spookablast. It's a Spookablast film.
Nice.
That's what I've heard before. Where they're just throwing ghoulies at you.
It does kind of make sense too with just how with the title, like we said, it's like it's very to the point. It's the same thing with the rules of the ghosts themselves. They're just like, no, this is just a haunted school in general, just haunted.
It's what it says on the tin. It's exactly what you get a haunted school. You get a haunted school in this movie.
Exactly. Yeah, multiple ghost stories basically.
It was funny too because I watched this today and last night I watched the local Toronto Grindhouse here. Was playing a 35mm print of that film One Dark Night from 1982. I
like that movie a lot.
Jason Lives, and I had a good time with it last night. But part of what you just said reminded me of it, where it kind of feels like a like more like a ride or like walking into like a spooky haunted house thing. And there is a with One Dark Night specifically, you could say that there's like, there's kind of a lot of like the talking and waiting in line portion of that experience. And then when it gets to the actual like haunted mausoleum where you have a psychic vampire reanimating all the corpses of the like mausoleum, basically straight out of like Phantasm. And it's basically just a bunch of corpses just start falling on people and shit. And there is something funny about like that some movies are just made for that experience where you're just walking through it and like, oh, here's another thing. And one thing I'll say is that it actually compares favorably, Haunted School does, I think, to One Dark Night because of the sheer visual imagination of what those, sort of like Halloween prank style set pieces end up actually looking like. I think there's a lot of visual strangeness and imagination on display in this that I was pretty pleased with once it jumps into the spooky mode. I did feel there was a little bit of repetition in order to kind of get you there. It is a lot of elementary school kids get stuck in a school and they walk around the various places. And at a certain point, what I was getting out of it was I was like, wow, really nice production design. Whoever like put all that dust and cobwebs and fucking stains everywhere. Like they did a really good job making the school look like the most like the filthiest, most abandoned school you've ever seen, which also led to one great recurring gag that I loved, which is both of these films I said at the top have janitors. There's one gag in this film where there's like a janitor who we eventually find out actually is also a ghost. Although I do like the reveal that at first the kids just think he's a normal janitor working in the abandoned wing, which why would that be the case? But when the teacher eventually comes up to him and is like, oh shit, you're a... Like I remember you like when I was a kid, like like he was a janitor a long time ago, and the fact that he just gets so pissed off trying to clean that place up the whole time. He's like, man, who spilled this here? Who put this dirt here? Like all that. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to clean that place up. It's fucking disgusting.
One of my favorite moments too is when I think it's when he's introduced to the kids and they have a fairly normal conversation or whatever, and then he leaves and all the lights go off or whatever, and after that they can't find him. They decide to just pee in the hallway, and then later on by the time
he's like, who fucking did this?
And you already know he's like a ghost kind of demon thing, and he starts like just screaming at them, and then there's kind of a transformation which we'll get to and everything, but I did love that there was like this kind of little kid mischief and then like a punishment that's kind of coming from the spirits themselves. It's not always the case. A lot of the case is just them getting lost and then going into a scary room or something. But there's every once in a while there's something where they do an action and then the spirit directly kind of goes after them for it. And that one is a funny one.
Yeah, I love that
this one is more
so
thoroughly
angry.
Silly, spooky vibes, right?
Yeah. Oh, very much. This
part.
one's way closer to an actual kids film.
What I
just
will
with tons of cool puppets.
Yeah, and what I will say though is some of the scares once they get there aren't things that I would traditionally say would be in a kids movie, at least in like a Western kids movie. Like the scene where there's a bunch of like hands that reach out from the floor and then consume the kid, like grab him and take him into the floor and everything. It's
one of the best images in the movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And there's like the ghost girl that has the big smile, the creepy demon smile and everything. It's genuinely kind of terrifying to look at. And I could imagine if I was fucking 10 years old, this would really put me out for a couple nights.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. No, they don't hold back on the creatures, and that's important.
Yeah.
I think that more gateway horror and stuff for kids, I think it's very important to have stakes. And like, if you walk back your antagonists or your threat, kids will feel pandered to or like talked down to, or what they'll feel the watering down happening, and they'll feel like you're being condescending, I think.
Yeah, no, totally. I think there's an adventure, especially, when you're younger. I'm sure you guys can remember watching something that just pushes the boundaries a little more than you're used to. You feel excited about that, especially young. You're just kind of like, there's that moment where you go, you're almost looking around like, am I supposed to be watching this? And that's always exciting. Yeah. And this movie has a ton of that.
I brought it up a couple times on this show, but I think my experience was still Child's Play, because I had a scary doll in it, and I was like, well, it's about a kid. It's about a kid and his toy. Like that, like I should be, it's a horror film, but like I should be allowed to watch that. And I watched it, and I had like nightmares about the fucking Chucky doll. I was like, this is
totally. Mine was It. And it was just because it was the sewer and the mix of clown and sewer, and then every time I went to the bathroom, I was like, this guy's gonna reach up into my butt. I don't want this at all. So yeah, for me it was It.
Yeah, and we've talked about a couple movies I think that exploit that balance like really, really well. Like one example we talked about, I think maybe a year ago, we did that movie The Gate. From 1987 with a little baby Stephen Dorff in it. Yeah. But that's one of those ones where like the actual horror sequences are pretty like graphic, like when his dad's head just like falls off right in front of him, or some of the actual creature effects are like borderline Italian horror, or I mean, speaking of which, I already mentioned it, but like Phantasm. That I think is maybe the best example of this kind of movie where like it's clearly a story about a kid's experience, and it could be kind of watched and enjoyed by someone of a little bit of a younger age, but it is genuinely creepy enough to actually freak them out. Like that is like Phantasm is basically, in terms of sequencing, it is like a Fulci movie about teaching kids the concept of mortality.
And I love Phantasm because it feels like you can read the entire film as a kid dealing with the death of his parents, specifically after he just finished reading the book Dune, because there's so many scenes that are just ripped right from Dune.
It's so true.
But absolutely, I agree.
Because I remember too when we talked about Phantasm, we were like, yeah, he puts the hand in the box and everything. Like, like, come on, man.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think this film, the tone setting is really fun, and I think it does it perfectly, because you're going to have that balance of the kind of child innocence that comes with the horror, and then also it kind of explains the beats that the suspense is actually still going to be built into it and well done. They introduce the movie in a dark school, and there's one teacher left for the night, and he keeps getting these
stormy,
phone calls.
spooky phone call, and almost like a Twin Peaks sounding synths. But then, what if they turned into like a Danny Elfman score?
I had the same that same kind of note where I instantly thought of Twin Peaks, because it has those really soft synths that you hear in the introduction.
It's like, and
it really holds have them throughout. But then they also have what I was talking about with as soon as we're done talking about it, just blanks my mind. What did we just talk about? Gosh, you have this problem too. Don't be making fun of me.
I know. But my issue is that I'm
HIRUKO the Goblin. That's what it was.
HIRUKO the Goblin. Look at us go.
Yeah. And now I feel like I forgot my point. What my point even was after that little.
We were talking about the Danny Elfman style music. All of a sudden.
Right, and it has that in HIRUKO the Goblin, where it kind of has these like very beautiful sweeping orchestral stuff. But in this, it has that mix where it has it orchestral, but then it goes into this almost. I don't know, it's dreamy synth-like stuff that I think you're right is like Twin Peaks.
But done in also this like, again, sort of like spooky, silly, like Halloween movie kind of vibe thing too, where it's like the man is attacked by a floating watermelon jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. It reminded me of it was, well, I guess, no, this one's more of a conventional, like it turns into a really adult horror film, but there's these little things that feel childish because it's still Halloween, which is that movie Trick or Treat. But yeah, I love this introduction where it turned into like a watermelon pumpkin thing. I thought was really cute and still worked well with how the rest of the film, like building.
And it kind of sets you up for some of the unreality of some of the effects work too, where it is like, you know, it's a little bit of some early digital augmentation being put in there. There's a little bit of green screen and compositing work that they're doing to achieve the effects. And then there's also, you know, these very more traditional gooey, goopy kind of practical effects when we actually meet the various, you know, sort of diversity of ghouls that we're going to run into over the course of this evening with this with the elementary school kids. But it sets you up well to prepare yourself for the kinds of ambitious imagery they're going to try to pull off. Because I think some people might go, you know, some of the effects aren't like the strongest effects you've ever seen or anything like that. But I think that there is a really great like energy to the visuals that they're trying to pull off. And even if there's you can see the seams on a couple of them, I found them incredibly charming even when they were doing that. Like even stuff where like you can tell the kids are on like a composited they're in a frame that's clearly composited, but like you can see the giant foot chasing behind them and stuff like that. Like I don't care that seems kind of goofy. It's like there is a certain like, man, they really pulled that shot off, you know. And there's a lot of this when it actually gets into the set piece mode. It takes a little bit, I think, to get into the eventual set pieces. There's a lot of time spent with the kids on like the last day before summer vacation, just kind of like figuring out what's happening. And because you've seen a movie like this, you're a little bit of is you waiting for the kids to kind of catch up to where you are, where you're like, yeah, that school's haunted, man. There's ghosts in there. There's bloody handprints on the ceiling. There's like an eerie floating soccer ball that the girl has to, follow at one point. Obviously too, they set up some things like a statue gets broken and the kids are playing near it. And like, did that unleash some evil spirits? Yeah. By the end of the film, do we need to reseal that in order to put them back in? Like there's stuff in here you're pretty familiar with, I think, but again, they do also set up some pretty cool stuff. Like when they briefly show you the abandoned wing of the school and they show you the shot of the dissected frogs, for example, and the fish in like the biology lab and stuff that they start moving. Yeah. It's done in this very low key way that you're like, oh man, I hope when we come back to the biology lab, it's going to be fucking sick. And I'll tell you, it is fucking sick. One of the craziest things in this movie is the one that Trevor already alluded to, the anatomical model in the biology lab where it has this guy literally comes to life, but he has like clearly some sort of like suit or mask on that makes him just look like a giant doll. But then he has actual gooey organs that are just like hanging out of him and shit that the kids are just like running from. His intestines are basically just drooping out of him, and it's pretty awesome. And I do wish because they have this little introduction where the kids are kind of, they're scaring each other and they're in the haunted school and someone's looking for the girl, but then two other guys are just kind of walking around and being mischievous and everything. But he has one of them carries around the fake skeleton diagram that is in the science class for a little bit of it. And I was kind of hoping that he would, after seeing that reveal of the anatomy model, I was kind of hoping that that's the thing that he was also carrying around the whole time. So when it transforms, it becomes like it's something that he had around him the whole time. I think it would just added a little bit of a creep factor to it. But but there is some really like awesome stuff in here. But then it does fight a little bit with its conventional stuff that, like you were saying, Josh, we already are kind of aware of and we know what's going to happen in that sense. We just know these beats, right? You've seen the movie before in a sense. Like one of them is where they always introduce the one ghost girl spirit as a girl in a red dress. And then eventually there's this girl that appears and she appears more normal. I think she's like a 6th grader or whatever. And she's just dressed in red and she kind of comes out of nowhere. And right away, I think if you've seen any movie like this, your brain's going to be like, oh, ghost girl. Like that's the reveal here. And if sure enough, that is what happens. And one of the boys is kind of, falling for her and stuff. And I do think that there is a lot of
cute innocence there that I really do enjoy. And it
yeah,
works
do you know
well
what?
'cause it's
Weirdly
about
enough,
the
I was
kids
actually
growing up,
taken.
so.
I was taken by it. I did not
also
spot that
charming.
one as
It's also
early,
charming.
but that was
Yeah.
only because I knew right away that the janitor was. I didn't expect them to do it twice.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, totally. I can get that. And it's not even like, it didn't bother me by any means, because I still think that they have a lot of cute moments, and I think him.
Yeah,
having
the
big
actual
crush
moment
on
where they
her-
reveal that she's the ghost, I think they actually handle pretty well, where all
Yeah,
the kids
and-
are going back to safety, and she's like, I can't go with you. Like, I was just kind of being a helpful spirit, and I do like that moment in the film. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and I think even in that moment, since it didn't, like, the reveal doesn't surprise me, I think for his character it still really works well. Like, just the reveal for him, I think works. Him trying to grab onto her, and he goes through her body and everything like that, and then we'll get to the finale, of course. But
This is the double feature of guys who have crushes on the older girls at their school who are dead.
Who are dead, unfortunately.
Double feature.
Yeah. Even more difficult to pull off.
Yeah.
But yeah, so besides a few things like that, that still end up working, really. It for the most part, it really did work for me. It's just, I agree that like the first 30, 45 minutes before things start to really kick into gear are a little bit too conventional just for how many films we've seen over the years.
Well, and even the stuff that they do that's conventional, I think they find some silly jokes to kind of throw in there that I kind of enjoyed. Like, I did like the one kid who's like obsessed with like magic or the occult or whatever, who's like drawing small little pentagram and like chalk or whatever. And they set that up early on, that he's drawing like the spell, the summoning circle or whatever. And then at a certain point, they're like, wow, this is a way bigger haunting than I expect. 'Cause he's like the one kid who actually like believed that it was haunted or whatever. Yeah. And so he's trying to get ahead of it. And then at a certain point, he realizes how haunted it is. And he goes, oh shit, I need a way bigger fucking summoning circle, man. I'm going to need to take the soccer field. I'm going to need to get some people to help me draw this one.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is funny. I do like that overall thing though. Him building the circle, reading the book, getting the cyclists to help him eventually.
That's a good gag too. Just the woman who has a bunch of cycling friends. Like, all right, let's get them all, and we'll look for this broken statue somewhere on the property to get back.
And I love
to
that they need to do a giant circle around the school, so they're using the line for football fields, the dispenser of the that's really cool. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
You'll have like all the hauntings that are going on in the school, and it's like very, it's kind of scary and exciting. And then they'll cut to the kid that's outside, just like trying his best to build this summoning circle so that he can save his friends. But it's a little more calm in the sense of energy there. And I thought it was great. It actually worked really well. It was kind of comedic in a sense. Another thing though that works really well, and I thought was kind of scary to think about, was when they start to really go deep into the haunted school, and they start getting separated more, and the school starts to give them these illusions of themselves, where it's like they'll two characters will walk into a door, and then that door will close, and it'll show the two characters that they were also with kind of like laughing or pointing at them and then leaving, and they think like, oh, they're pulling a prank on me, or they're being mean or whatever it is, and then they'll cut to the other two characters, and they're like banging on the door on the other side, like they have no idea what's just happened. So they're kind of giving them these false sights of things that are happening, but they're not. And I thought that was a really cool idea and kind of terrifying.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Characters playing pranks on people is always fun. I did like when they were carrying around the giant like prop skeleton in this, and they just like hurl it down the stairs at one of the kids, and they're like, "You're a fucking idiot to be scared of it." Yeah, there's no fucking dead people or ghosts in here, you idiot.
Cut to a 50
you moron.
To a 50-foot ghost chasing them down the hallway. That one was one of my favorites. I know we talked about it a little bit, but I thought it was incredibly well done. It just the use of, because it's really dark, and so they put a lot of the giant footsteps in the shadows, so you see the kids running in the foreground, and then these big steps just coming out of the darkness in the background, and for the most part it seems pretty seamless. Yeah
It's a great effect. Yeah, that's such a good moment. God, I love that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, because it's such a weird, it's a very unconventional ghost sighting. Like, you know, the other ones, although they're scary, you've seen something the same or kind of similar to it, but just having a big, giant 100-foot ghost walking the hallways, and it doesn't even make sense, like, logistically. The building is like 20 feet tall and this shin itself is 30 feet tall, so it just like it doesn't make any sense. And that kind of
you're just watching a giant sandal like almost step on fifth graders ultimately.
It's so strange, but I really liked it. I loved that imagery.
And most movies would have that once, but I think he even comes back again later in an equally improbable scenario or setting.
His whole face takes up a door frame that one of the boys is kind of trying to hide from him. It's really cool, but again, it makes no sense, and that it dives into this thing even where it's like the school itself becomes this almost maze. There's no moment in the movie where it even tries to make it seem like you know where each person is in the school. It just becomes like a labyrinth of hauntings, basically.
Yeah, well, and they run from room to closet to hallway, and they just keep running into like another one. You know, every once in a while they'll just be like, "Oh, here's the floating pink like Slimer from Ghostbusters monkey monster who just like starts fucking playing pranks."
And he's funny as hell too, because he's always in the background of characters. Like three of them will look at him and point, but then he's mocking the other one behind him. He reminded me of I think you actually said it already. It was the Ghostbusters ghost.
Yeah, the Slimer guy. Slimer, he's functionally he's very similar.
At one of the.
I think
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think he comes back in the sequels, but like he's CG and he's like not that cool puppet anymore, unfortunately, which is a shame.
Yeah, they do like what do they do? How did they do it in this? Is it like compositing with stop motion or something like that? Okay,
I think it's a hand puppet being composited into the background with like ghostly.
Yeah, I think they shot a separate layer so that they could do some light effects on it on top of the other
stuff. Glowing red and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. I really do like the because at first he's just kind of a little shit, like he just appears and then he doesn't do it, but he has this energy,
he doesn't
like
actually do anything. He just like
off.
scares everyone and goes, ha, like
he has this, he doesn't do it, but he has this energy that every time he's popping up, he's flipping everybody off and just laughing. It's that kind of vibe. And then eventually, once they get into a classroom with him, he does have a cool scene where he's put all the desks and the chairs on the ceiling and then just starts dropping them on
honestly though, great prank.
So
great prank. I mean, like awesome after prank. We did that episode on frauds where we were like, these are questionable pranks. Like Phil Collins, these aren't really pranks. This is just Phil Collins being an asshole. There's not that much effort being put into this. That one guy, like for anyone who didn't hear that episode, there's a prank in frauds that's just some guy committing a home invasion and then the woman kills him and he goes and he goes, what, you can't like take a joke? And even the judge is like, that wasn't a very good prank. Like you just invaded her home and threatened to kill her. Like that
she
wasn't
got off
really
innocent due to bad prank.
Yeah, by contrast, this guy's got actual prank energy. Like all of a sudden you're walking into a classroom and all of the fluorescent lights are on the floor and all the desks are on the ceiling and you're just like, what the fuck? And again, speaking of the production design, like the production design of this movie I think is really, really great. And what a fantastic little like room that they have to experience. And then when everything starts to like fall on them and shit, it's great.
Yeah, and then they even do a cool little trick where they have like two of the desks in the frame of the camera at a certain point when they're hiding on the ground and kind of hurtled up to protect themselves. And they have the two desks. I'm assuming they're like on strings or something, but outside of the camera's view. And they actually stop mid-air so that they can be like, are we calm? Are we calm? And then he drops them once again just to finalize the prank a little bit. But they do it practically in camera. And I thought that was just awesome. It's such a fun movie. I think that's the thing. Like it does. I mean, not that HIRUKO isn't, but it's just in a different way because you have all the like gushing blood and all of this. This one is just seeing all these little ghost ideas that the kids have to deal with is pretty endlessly entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is genuinely very imaginative once it actually gets on the roll that it's going. Like, again, the switch immediately from like the giant ghost to the anatomical model in the biology lab that's actually like hunting them down, and like and really quickly it's moving on to, you know, the stop motion claymation hands that are like reaching up at this kid like a sea of like foggy like zombie hands, you know, that kind of thing. And then one of my favorites was the ghostly string orchestra that they play at one point, and great use of obviously the shrieking violins that the ghosts are playing as score, because you're actually hearing that music before they even appear. And you're just like, oh, this is just the score for the movie. And then all of a sudden you actually get the band slowly start to like glow green in the background. They almost look like in Return of the King, the dead army. They kind of they appear in like that very greenish ghostly form, and you even get the conductor turning around and doing this like zombie like disgusting grin in the direction of the kids, and they start like freaking out and running to the next room. And like, so like every single scene at this point is just a series of like, we run to the next room, there's a ghost in there, we run to the next room, there's a ghost in there. And on some level you need like that's a very repetitive concept, and part of me thinks that they maybe could have by the end they maybe could have came up with a couple others. But if you're going to do that kind of repetition, like, you need to have, and I think this film does successfully have, like a actual diversity of the amounts of things that you see and the forms you see them in, and the way that the set pieces actually behave. Like, one is like a guy chasing you around like a zombie. Another one is just like a really creepy, you know, disturbing image. The other one is like actually like more of like an apocalyptic image of like a giant foot is going to crush the entire building. Like,
it turns into a constantly feature eventually with the janitor. Like, he becomes a giant thing monster. Like,
that's the closest thing. That's the closest thing to obviously HIRUKO the Goblin, is that the janitor straight up, which I think is really well detailed throughout, where it's like the janitor is actually a ghost because the only person who recognizes him is the teacher, who's like, yeah, you were the janitor when I was in school. And then all of a sudden he's like vomiting up in a giant entire hairy spider out of his mouth, and he's like, oh whoops, like put that back in there, like Men in Black style almost. And then he starts growing his own like pincers and hair and slime, and literally starts chasing them around like this like grotesque like half arachnid like Resident Evil monster form or something. It's fucking crazy.
You know what, Resident Evil I think is the thing that came to my mind, because although there's a more, it's like you can understand the anatomy a little bit of what's happening in HIRUKO the Goblin. This thing the janitor looks just like nonsense. Like, there's definitely like a little bit of spider inspiration and crab and stuff like that. But when you really look into it, it really is just ugly. Like, that's kind of the design. It's just like chaos, random ugliness. I do love that he starts to turn into like more of a physical threat than the rest of the things. Like, not that they aren't, it's just that this one, he's more aggressive. Like, he's screaming at them and sprinting and going like, don't run in the halls and stuff like that.
He also has like my favorite piece of imagery in the entire movie, which is his glasses fall off and his eyes are like on the outside of the glasses, and they have these actual, like, they actually physically made these latex eyes that blink on the front of the glasses on the ground.
Really the kid has to step on them at one point, right?
He squishes them.
It's sweet too, because they cut back to him after he's lost the glasses, and then it shows like empty eye sockets in his eyes, and it's really the only thing in that face at that point that looks human, and now it doesn't anymore either. So it's I love it's kind of similar again with the evolution of the goblins in HIRUKO, but I love the evolution of this janitor. Just he gets slowly more turned into a grotesque monster.
Yeah, and a lot of movies could just have that like beautiful practical effects janitor transformation into the cockroach or whatever, and like they would just let the whole movie rest on that, and you could do that easily. But it has so much on top of that, like the various ghosts and the giant, like we've talked about a lot. Even all the way to like, I think there's a part where they go to a classroom and the classroom is flipped, so they're walking on the ceiling and all the desks are on the. That's good. That was
with the red ghost guy, the poltergeist, basically.
Yeah, and
What a
like
prank.
you could easily do a handful of these things, or one or two, and like the movie would function exactly the same. You could probably get away with it. It wouldn't have the variety that is so intrinsic and well done. But you could do it. It would be serviceable. But like it really you can feel the love into each of these like handcrafted set pieces and monsters and puppets and all that behind the scenes. Like it really comes through, and that's why the movie sings, and that's why it works, I think, at all.
Yeah, and there's this I like when the kids also start to, because a lot of it is just them, they're taking in everything, they're getting attacked, some of them are getting pulled into the void or hell or whatever it is. And eventually they start to actually fight back, and it's really cool. They the way that they like electrocute the crab guy, for instance, is they get like a wire together and hook it up to the fence that he's touching, and then it like starts to electrocute him, and he at the last second he lets go of the kid and all that. It's just there's some exciting beats once it gets into the action. It becomes almost less horror when the kids decide to fight back, and it becomes more of like this Goonies thing in a way.
So
a little bit.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that too.
Well, and that's the big climax, right? Is that eventually like the janitor kind of chases them through all the remaining set pieces. Like he chases them into that room that's upside down, and then they do this whole thing where the kid is trying to form the magic circle, and at one point the paper like turns into like a butterfly or something. I was actually starting to lose track a little bit of what they were doing at a certain point, but I was like, and I think they're trying to just seal this evil spirit back into its into its little jar eventually, which we've been talking about, where the little kids getting the bikers to go and round it up, and they're trying to do this whole thing, and the actual chasing through the school is basically the entire climax of the film, but the school is starting to like collapse at that point. You can see like wires and like pieces of like fencing coming through, and the whole thing is like, again, the production design is really fantastic while the school is like falling apart and everything like that. And it does conclude in like way more so, I guess, than I think you could say of HIRUKO, in more of like a cutesy kids adventure movie kind of fashion, as I think, Jamie, you were just referring to, like where it goes very Goonies style, where they do actually get the circle going on the field. They get a bunch of bikers around to find the statue. The kids make their way out by like doing this thing I think that's actually pretty visually cool, which is that the school ends up on the edge of a pit, like a really, really dark, like it's almost like the
something.
Yeah, the shot I've always loved at the end of that one Robert Rodriguez movie that's so much better than the rest of the movie is. Why am I blanking on what it is? The one with the vampire bar.
From Dusk Till Dawn. Where they back out at the end, and it's a big Aztec temple matte painting.
Yeah, I've always I like that movie, but there's always been something to me about like that like ancient horror image finale where there is like the temple and then also like a giant hole as well, where I've always just been like, man, what would that movie be like? And so I always like when there's like this big sort of like void like ancient thing happening here, and the fact that the kids have to like kind of be brave enough to like throw themselves into it in order to get back to the outside the school and everything like that. And it does it actually in this pretty well directed way, in my opinion, where they jump into the hole. The teacher takes the one kid in. They all go in one at a time. Obviously, they also have that emotional beat where they find out the 1 6th grade girl who's been helping them the whole time is a ghost and can't jump in with her. So they're going to have to leave her behind with all of these horrible spirits. So the one kid's a little sad about that. But when they jump through into the hole, they come out the other side, like just in the swimming pool. But it's done in this like slow-mo. They actually land in the swimming pool and they make their way out. And there's something about the return to the normalcy of the kids and like the rebirth imagery there that I found pretty effective. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I also love the way that they show the initial dive into the pool from the void jump, where it shows underwater completely, and it actually feels really deep the way that they're falling into it. And then they get out, and the camera cuts from that shot to them outside the water or above the water,
and they're standing just like it's 3 feet of water or something like that. And so it's just cool. It kind of catches them in like a different place and then brings them back to the swimming pool.
Yeah, like it totally bends the physics of the world, what they've done, right?
Yeah.
Yes, totally. And then before that too, just as they're falling and as it's cutting back and forth between the kid doing the circle and them falling, it's actually pretty trippy. They have a lot of like really bright lights going on, and the earth is like there's an earthquake going on too, so there's a little bit of shaking and just a lot of screaming, obviously, and some really like I can't exactly remember if there's a score, but there's a lot of just atmospheric sounds going on. It's honestly very exciting to watch. It's a very cool finale of them going back into their the Earth realm or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I thought that everything put together here in this finale was cool. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. It works. It all comes together in a really cool way.
But then obviously all the kids go back to summer vacation, man. Flowers, pretty music, sunshine, you know. Although I do like that once again they do it in the context of like the kids kind of have to learn that like another kid could die and be lost in like that spiritual realm.
Yeah, he has to say goodbye.
Yeah, like they come out in both cases, like they come out the other side and they go, wow, like this girl that I knew is dead and now she's on the other side, and they have to kind of learn to come to terms with that. And there's a nice little connective tissue between the two movies about guy who little schoolboys in love with dead girls.
Yep. And I do like the one last thing. He's kind of sad about, you know, having a connection and losing it. But then he says like, she said, "Don't forget me, only to me," and kind of that warms his heart. You know, he's sad about it, but he's gonna kind of savor that connection that he had at least.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's grown up a little bit. They've learned some things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hell yeah.
Very, very, very cool. If we're pivoting towards reductive rating round on this one as well, Haunted School. This one was also very, very solid 3 for me. I do see myself maybe coming back to this one, and I would like to see like a restoration, and I would like to see more of them. Like again, I do think that this is like very visually imaginative, you know, and like the previous one, ostensibly family friendly. And this one more so, even because it has some elements that you could compare to Goosebumps or Goonies or things like that. But it once again, it does strike that right balance of being like silly and watchable enough that a kid could find enjoyment in this, especially with the, you know, like there's a fucking, you know, a red monkey ghost playing pranks, but still genuinely being kind of gross and surreal and frightening when it counts, like when it is doing like the anatomical body with organs hanging out is chasing the kids around. It's a freaky image when the zombie hands are coming up and grabbing the kid and almost swallowing him, like the hands are forming a mouth or something. Like it's creepy. The production design is genuinely textured and filthy, like all the dust and cobwebs and the, you know, the freaky nature of like feeling like you're in this cramped space, that there's a threatening spirit in every single room and you don't know, and it's unpredictable too, and having a level of diversity of ghosts contributes to that unpredictability. And there's and from what I understand too, I don't think we mentioned this, but like part of this I guess is based on a like a volume of like ghost stories or something like that there was like some like school teacher or something who was like he was literally like crowdsourcing ghost stories from like students and teachers and stuff that they were kind of hearing about, and they ended up publishing volumes of them, and then that was what this was ended up being, I think, adapted from. And that's just a cool concept. I think it works. I think and now I understand why there could be like 3 sequels to that, because it's like, who know, you could, you know, there's no shortage of these like creepy stories, and you know I mean, even now in the internet age with things like creepypasta and stuff like that too, like there's, you know, spreading creepy stories like this is something that I think people find enjoyable, and I think that this is a pretty well done version of that for kids. So I had a good time with it. My only issue, I think, was that it did get a little, you know, some of the pacing and some of the repetition I don't think was, you know, in the perfect zone. Yeah. But you know, I still got quite a lot out of this and would recommend it for sure.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I would give it a strong 3. I almost did for it. It's just I think that beginning, the pacing is a little bit too stretched out. I understand why they're doing it. You know, they're introducing every character that you're going to see, and I do like establishing kind of their friendships and their innocence, so that when you do get to all of the ghost stuff eventually, it has more of an impact because you like the kids, and you know that they're just kids at the end of the day. So them going through this kind of hell is can be stressful. So I think that they do a really good job of eventually turning that innocence into just amazing, like haunting ghost scenes. I think that's really good. And because they've established that, it makes it a little bit more haunting when it happens. I think they could have cut out a little bit of the introductory stuff just to keep the pacing flow a little more. And I just think it would have had that more exciting feeling. But I do. But
man, when it gets going into those set pieces, though, it is
it's crazy good. Yeah. Every single one. Like there wasn't really one classroom, I guess, when they walk in, because that's pretty much what it is. They go into like an individual classroom, and there's a different haunting in each one, essentially. There isn't one that I didn't find memorable or effective. I thought once they get into that, it's all very, very good stuff. And different. Like we said, you go from creature feature crab, spider, monster, janitor guy, to like a Fulci hands swallowing a kid into a floor, to a very more traditional image of like the smiling girl ghost and all of that. Like there's just so much to take in, and they do every single thing really well, even if it feels like it could be disconnected. The way that they use the story, it doesn't. They really are just setting it up like the title says, it's a haunted school, generally speaking. So
and here's a family-friendly adventure movie about a haunted school, and if you're and if that's the pitch, I think this is like this is the kind of one that is still going to end up freaking kids out, which is always enjoyable.
Yeah. And it feels like still conventional enough in a sense of a kid's movie that a kid could really latch onto it, but then once they get to those moments, I think they would be genuinely scared. And I do like the ending. There's one little thing that we didn't mention where they go back to the school at the end, and they leave flowers at the school, and they all introduce themselves to I think it was Cairo, the girl that died and they had to leave behind. And there's just something about that it's like they've accepted the death, and they realize what it was and the significance of it, and then they turn around and go back to being boys in summer vacation. So I think that mix of things is really good, and I love the finale in that sense. So yeah, awesome. I'm gonna give it a strong 3.
For you, Trevor.
Probably a 3.5. If I'm in the right mood, I could boost it all the way to the 4, because an unrelenting string of various creatures and ghoulies and goblins is pretty much all I could ever ask for in a film. But you're right, it does take some time to get going into that. And while I do agree that I think that the good stuff hits all the harder because of the early stuff, it is a bit of a slog to get to that stuff initially. But otherwise, once you're in it, you're golden. After that first 20 minutes, it's just unrelenting, and there's everything you could possibly ask for in terms of a film called Haunted School. So I'd say like teetering on the edge between a 4 and a 3.5 for this one.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for Haunted School and for this week's episode. Once again, that was HIRUKO the Goblin from 1991 and Haunted School from 1995. Thanks so much, Trevor, for showing us these films and for joining us and talking about them with us. We always enjoy the films that you that you bring on to show us. A lot of the time, it's stuff that I feel like sometimes I've heard of it, and sometimes I'm like, I'm going to get around to that. But Trevor is always pushing us in the horror realm, and we're always happy for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem. Trevor, this is usually the part of the show where if you've got anything to plug, we have you do that. And I feel like you got a big thing to plug this week.
Yeah, this time I do. I got a good one. So I wrote a spooky kids versus monsters book for Scholastic for middle grade readers. I did all the art. I did the cover. It's got 26 black and white interior drawings, kind of in the tradition of Stephen Gammell for the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books.
Ooh, cool.
So good. So good.
And that comes out on October 3rd. It is kind of like it's a hardcover. You can get it wherever you're going to get books. It's going to be, I'm told, at like the Scholastic Book Fairs, which is like a dream come true for me.
Hell yeah! I can't believe. Sometimes I actually have a little sister, and I recently found out that those are still a thing, and I was like, wow, what a magical place.
They were one of my favorite things when I was growing up. So it's really nice, and it's an honor to have something dropping there, and I hope it scares a bunch of kids in the best possible way. That's right.
Are you also, for anyone local, you're doing a book signing too, right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so if you're in Toronto, on October 7th at, I believe, 1 p.m., I will be signing copies of Scare Waves at Little Ghost Books, which is on, God, I need the address. It's on Dundas.
On Dundas West, for anyone who knows Toronto.
Here we go. It's on 930 Dundas.
I just wanted to bring it up because I will be there, man. I'm going to come get I'm going to come get my copy.
Awesome. I'm sure I'll be doing a reading.
I also love that bookstore, so I like to. I'm gonna try and buy it through them rather than like buying it off Amazon or something.
Absolutely, they're wonderful. They're such an They're already like intrinsic to the horror culture in Toronto. They're doing such great things and promoting such great authors. And I'm really happy to have a signing there, and that's the big thing right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Scare Waves, you can get it wherever you're getting books from, and if you're in Toronto, Little Ghost Books doing a little book signing on October 7th. So definitely look into it. For our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time where we're going to be doing finally your patron voted episode.
Oh boy.
Which I'm sure most people are familiar at this point because we've been doing it for a couple of years now. But once every 2 months, we let you guys vote on the double feature, and we do the most upvoted one that you guys select. So we're going to be talking about conservative fathers trying to save the young women in their life. In the case of one, The Searchers, with John Ford and John Wayne. I'm sure one of the very canonized American westerns. I'm sure most people are familiar. But we're going to be pairing it with Paul Schrader's Hardcore, with George C. Scott, who is not trying to save his daughter from some Native Americans, but is trying to save his daughter from the pornography industry of California. That's right. These are outmoded men dealing with the future of America in both cases. So we're going to be talking about that next week over on the Patreon feed. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be entering the realm officially of Spooktober. Kind of, Trevor gave us a little bit of a early kickstart here, but we are going to be officially entering Spooktober, where we're going to be having a special guest on to talk about some big ones. We're going to be talking about Don't Look Now, directed by Nicholas Rogue, I'm pretty sure. And then we're going to be talking about The Vanishing, which is one of those kind of like ruin your evening kind of films. In my opinion,
not a lot of hope in that one.
No, but I do really love that movie, and I am very excited to give that one another watch, because in terms of like a sort of. It has a very odd perspective for that kind of like foreign serial killer kind of movie, and sort of a kidnapping movie, and very, very slow and sad and creepy. Yeah. So that's what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks' time over on the main feed to kick off Spooktober. So
let's get sad.
To that. Let's do it. All right. But that being said, that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.
Bye.